Elementary music teacher friend, you love what you do, but you might feel unappreciated and, in fact, unseen some days. You may even feel like you're on a music teacher island and just want to connect with other music teachers who can relate to both your struggles and wins when it comes to teaching elementary music. I get you and understand completely the feelings you're having. That's why each and every week, the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast will provide you with solo and guest episodes that will help you realize you're not alone in your music teaching journey. Throughout each episode, my goal is for you to be able to walk away with actionable steps and ideas to help you feel like you're ready to take on the new week with whatever challenges may be thrown your way. Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Peresta, and I'm so glad you're here. Whether you're at home, in your car, in the shower, or wherever else you're listening, grab your cup of coffee or whatever other beverage is nearby and listen in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. Hey, you. Yes, you, music teacher friend. Did you know there are 4 workshops coming this summer just for you? I've listened and I've identified some of the greatest needs of music teachers in my online community and can't wait to dive into a few areas to help you move forward before you head into next school year. The workshops will be about classroom management and what it is and isn't, structuring your class time effectively and efficiently, organizing your lesson plan so you know what to pull from and when to do it, and a full 4-day workshop where we'll plan out your entire first month of school together. To find out more and to sign up for these workshops, simply head to thedomesticmusician.com/events, and you'll see the dates and the details there, or simply click on the link in the show notes to join. I'm so excited, and I can't wait for you to join me for 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of these workshops. Welcome back to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. I am recording this in the month of May, and I just cannot believe it's already May. This school year has kind of flown by, but gone really slowly at the same time. I don't know if that makes any sense to you listening, but it's like the never-ending story, but also, oh my gosh, like we're nearing the end here. So this episode is going to be sharing some end of the school year activities that you can do with your students, but also to just kind of give you a little bit of motivation as well as you continue moving towards the end of the school year. Some of your school years end in May, some end in June. And if you are one of my friends listening who teaches in other parts of the world, I know some of your school years go from January through December. So this episode is, like I said, kind of be all over the place a little bit, but it will, I promise, kind of make sense as I get going. I want to first of all I want you, as we're thinking about wrapping up the end of the school year with your students, I want you to let go of guilt of what you didn't get to do this school year. Maybe you haven't had that happen. Maybe you have not sat down and had some guilt about, oh man, look at all these months of what I would normally get to do with my students. Maybe you are still teaching virtually fully. Maybe you have not gone back in person at all. Maybe you're one of those teachers who you just got to go back to in-person teaching just this last month or couple weeks. Maybe you have been teaching in person, but you still have not been able to do things the way you normally have in your classroom because of, you know what, I'm not going to name it. You know what I'm talking about. But I want you to let go of the guilt of what you didn't get to do and focus on what you did get to do. I have talked about that in previous episodes about, yes, you can't walk around like the cup is half full all the time. It's not normal. It's not natural to do that. I'm not that way. I have days I'm overwhelmed. I have days where I am feeling exhausted or down or having an off day. But I also don't stay in that place. And I'm encouraging you to do the same. If you're feeling upset or sad about the way this school year has gone, that's okay. let yourself feel those emotions. And if someone's telling you not to, then, just don't listen to that person. Because I feel like processing through your thoughts, through your emotions of what you have experienced and gone through, it has been a lot. It's a lot, like a lot for you to handle. And it's kind of crazy to think about all that has happened, not just this school year, but the end of the previous school year as well. So instead of focusing on what you didn't get to do with your students, though, I want you to think about, what did you get to do? We have talked about that already on this podcast, but think about the different technologies maybe you've gotten to finally start exploring and use with your students. Maybe you have been able to present lessons in different ways, or you've been able to dive deeper into certain content areas because maybe your students couldn't sing, or if they couldn't play recorder, you pivoted to do something else. I'm thinking of one of my son's music teachers, and instead of doing like recorder karate, she did a xylophone karate. She just kind of pivoted and changed up the instrument. But I feel like music teachers more than anyone, and if you're listening to this and you're not a music teacher, teachers in general are very resilient, hard workers, think quick on your feet, are so good about pivoting and coming up with ideas on the fly. That's just what you do. And so this year is no exception. And so I want you, maybe not right now because you're in the midst of it all, but sometime this summer, take the time to really just think about and process all the amazing things you have done this school year with your students. Yes, it's not maybe the same that you normally would do. It's not the lessons you would normally teach. It's not the same way you would normally present the lessons. But think of what you have done with them. Have you seen smiles on your kids' faces? Maybe not as much as you normally would because they have masks on, but maybe you've gotten like an elbow bump instead of a fist bump. Maybe you've seen kids just look at you and just, you can see they're smiling because of their eyes. They're smizing. Maybe you just have heard a child tell you they love your class. They love coming in there. And you know what? Here's the thing with kids. They don't know what they don't know. Okay, what I mean by that is you may be grieving the fact that things are a little bit different or have been different, but your students, they don't know. And yes, your older students, maybe, fourth and fifth graders, they know what music class has been like in previous years, but they still don't know what it was supposed to be like in fourth and fifth grade. You grieving that fact because you're the music teacher is okay, but your students don't know. I have 3 boys of my own, and one of my sons is a kindergartner. And honestly, I have grieved on the mom side of things a few times this year, thinking of his kindergarten year and how different it is and how weird it is and how it's just not like a normal kindergarten year. But then I actually had that epiphany one day, and that's why I wanted to share that with you, that he doesn't know that this is not what it's supposed to be like. He doesn't know that wearing a mask to school is weird. He doesn't know that, normally he'd get to play with anyone outside at recess instead of just hanging out with his particular class. So your students, I want you to view it like that and kind of have a mindset shift. Instead of kind of grieving like what you didn't get to do, just remember that kids, they are more resilient than we give them credit for. And they don't know, like, maybe that they are missing out on some activities that you would typically do with, like, let's go back to 4th grade. Like a 4th grade year, what you would typically do with a 4th grade class, your current 4th graders, they don't know what you've done before. So think of it that way. Just kind of like think of things like that, of how far you've come, but also what music have you presented. And as long as your students have learned music this year, you've done your job. It does not matter how many times you've had to shift and turn that car around and go a different direction and make U-turns. If you've shown up, you have done your best. Even those days you have felt like you're just barely going through the motions, and you barely got to school, you're like not feeling it anymore. If you showed up and you put in the effort, even if it was not very much effort that day, you've done your best. Because sometimes this year, your best was just getting there, was just turning on your Zoom camera, was just sitting there and trying to teach. Even if you didn't feel like you knew what you were doing, you felt like your lessons were not as effective as they could have been in a pre-you-know-what year. I don't even want to say the word anymore. I'm so over talking about this. pandemic, but you guys know what I mean. But just think about how much you have done. And I know you're feeling the weight of it all. I know you're feeling overwhelmed. I know you're sick of this. I know you're tired. I know you may be listening to this and you've had thoughts of just quitting the teaching profession altogether. And that's a topic for another day. And if you've had those thoughts, I'm sorry. Because I know you feel unappreciated sometimes. You feel like nobody's noticing what you're doing. You feel like the teachers, your administrator, your students, the families at your school, the other coworkers, the staff in your building are not really appreciating your job sometimes. And yes, some of you listening to this, you have an amazing support system. You have an amazing school, and you know that they are there to support you and lift you up, and they have nothing but great things to say about not you as a person, but your music program. But there's some of you listening and you don't get those kudos and recognition. And it's tough to show up. It's a thankless job sometimes, especially during this school year. And you're just like, listen, I am like going out of my way and spending so many hours outside of my school day to sit here and plan content and pivot and try to figure out new ways. This is not natural for a music teacher to teach the way I've been teaching. It's just not natural to do it this way, but you've done it. So I want to, if nobody else has, before we get into some tips for the end of the school year, I want to just thank you for making a difference in the life of even one child this school year. You have. You may not notice, you may not know who that child is off the top of your head, but I promise you, you have made a difference. So I wanted to start this episode off before I get into some like fun activities and things like that by just saying that to you. All righty? So let's move forward. Wrapping up the school year with your students. There is a blog post I am going to link in the show notes that is called 5 End of the Year Elementary Music Activities. Now, this blog post was written before the pandemic. But with that said, there are some activities that you can 100% still do or adapt for your teaching situation if you would like. So I want to go through the 5 tips that I presented in this blog post first, and then I'm going to share some other ideas as well. The first one is instrument for squares. Now, this is an activity that is still, unless if you're teaching virtually, it may be a little bit trickier. But with that said, there are still ways, and I talk about this in my Harmony membership all the time. I help teachers adapt and modify lesson plans for different teaching situations. So I'll give you an example of this one. So instrument for squares. It's a really fun activity, and this is honestly one you could do outside, and maybe you are a music teacher, you've been told to do this outside. So if you're teaching this just regularly, what you do is you just have 4 squares blocked off, you have, or like taped off is what I meant, and you have a different family of instruments, strings, brass, percussion, and woodwinds, and each of those squares, and have them labeled or something, I don't know, and taped, like, just put a label so they know, or just verbally tell the students this is where what each square is. And you basically just say an instrument, and the students go to where the square is, to what the square is. Here's how you can adapt this. So if your students are still learning in person, they're still supposed to stay 6 feet away or whatever the new guidelines are. What you can do instead is, instead of the students wandering around the room or wandering around outside and being too close together, hand each child hand each child 4 signs when they walk into your room. You can make this simple. You could literally just print it off, 20 something copies of each family of instruments, and the kiddos will hold up the sign whenever you say an instrument. Okay. And then after you do this, I don't know, let's say 10 times, the kiddo who got it the most correct is the winner. If you do want to move around, then you can just explain to the kids how to spread out. I mean, just keep it. That's the simplest way I know how to tell you without going into detail forever. If this is virtual, if your students are learning virtually when it comes to instruments for squares, do it like I said before, where they hold up a sign when you call out an instrument, and they can kind of have fun by looking around the screen and seeing who said the same family that they did as well. Or you can tell them to maybe in their living room or to go outside, walk their Chromebook or laptop or whatever their device they're on outside, and they can look at their own 4 corners and walk to the corner of their yard or their living room, and they are going to play 4 corners that way. All right, so let's move on to the next idea. And by the way, there are so many end of the school year games and activities that you can do with your students as well. So actually, before I move on to the next activity I was going to talk about, I want to share with you some of the ideas I have shared in my Harmony membership for the very end of the school year. All right, so another great idea is called rhythm race. This is basically where there's just two X's on the floor or two sets of chairs, two chairs set side by side, and divide the students into two teams. Kids are facing the board. One player from each team will sit in their team's chair when it's their turn. Play a rhythm. You will play a rhythm on a drum, and the entire class will echo after you just by playing body percussion, patting their legs. And then after the class echoes the rhythm, you say go. The kids who are sitting in the chair will run to the whiteboard and write the rhythm down that they heard and race back to their seat. If they get the answer correctly, the student, whoever reaches their chair first, is the one you'll check first. They get a point. If they got it incorrectly, check the other student's answer and their team gets a point. If it's a tie, both teams get a point if it's correct. If no one gets it right, the next teammate will get the same rhythm called out and repeat the process. Okay, so if it's virtually, split the kids into two groups and just verbally tell them, name names and say you're group one, name names and say you're group two. Let students know who is it on each team. And the first student to unmute themselves on the word go and play the rhythm back to you, or write the rhythm down on a piece of paper, or type the correct rhythm into Google Classroom or in the chat box or whatever it might be, is the winner. If you're on a cart or you're modifying this lesson plan for whatever situation you're teaching with, whether your students are needing to spread out or whatever it looks like for you, they can do the activity the same way it's written, but instead of standing close together, they're just going to spread out or create more than two teams to allow you to space the students out more. So that was another activity. And like I said, I'm not going to go through every one of these games because I have a lot of them here. There's, let me choose one more too. This one's really fun. This one's called machine movements. Students are going to scatter around the room. Okay. Each student is a machine part, and they're going to create stationary movement to represent that part. One student is picked to begin traveling around the room, and that student travels like a robot from one machine part to the other. The traveling student will stop by one of the stationary students and begin copying their machine part movement. So basically, if someone sees a student standing there moving their arm side to side, it's really hard to show you this on a podcast. The student next to them will stand and start moving their arm side to side. So then the student who's being copied will now be the traveling student. Basically, when they see who was stopped by them and is mirroring their movement, the student who was the original machine part will start moving around the room and go to another kiddo moving their machine part around. So maybe their machine part is their head going side to side. So when they start moving their head side to side, that new student becomes it and starts walking around the room. If students are doing this from home, do it the same way as the modified classroom tips, where students won't be moving around the room, but doing their movement while standing still. The student who is it will copy the movement of someone else, and the students have to guess who they're copying. So here's the modified classroom tip. Students will stand on tape or in hula hoops to stay spaced apart. Instead of them moving around the room, the student who is it can copy the movement from the stationary spot. I hope that makes sense. I know that's really hard to explain over a podcast. If you want more detail about that, this lesson plan, this whole entire lesson plan pack with a lot of different end of the year activities is in my Harmony membership. And you can find the link to that in the show notes and get on the wait list so you're the first to know when the doors reopen. So the next thing I want to talk about is a talent show. Now, I have a whole episode back in episode 48 about how to put on an end of the year talent show. But I'm not going to go into detail about that on this episode, so you can re-listen to that. Now, that, of course, like I said, was recorded before, was recorded before COVID. But with that said, you can still totally do a talent show. You can do classroom talent shows where you can just do a talent show with the students in each class. Have a fun activity for them to do at the end of the year. I know a lot of the students are doing testing or have just finished testing. They're exhausted. They are not wanting to be at school anymore right now, just like the teachers. So bringing in fun activities for them to do is so cool. Now, also, when it comes to doing an end of the year performance or maybe like an end of the year wrap up or something really fun for your students to be able to see each other, here's an answer I gave to a Harmony member in the Facebook group not too long ago. She said, I'm working on simple end of the year virtual performances for each grade and was asking about fifth grade. She wanted to make it special for them because it's in the end of the year and also it's kind of a weird school year. So here's what I said to her, kind of paraphrasing. I said, for fifth grade to make it special, the first thing that came to mind for me was to have each class write their own songs using ukuleles and or the or for mallet instruments. And here's how I told her she could do this. Your fifth graders by now, if you have been at this school long enough, they know songs not just from this school year, but previous school years. If this is your first year with these fifth graders, they also know a whole school year's worth of songs now, right? So use familiar songs they've learned at any time during their elementary music time and let each class choose from a list of songs. Basically present them with a list of songs and say, as a class, we're going to choose a song together. Each class is going to collaboratively come up with various accompaniments, extra verses, ostinatos, and etc. to add to the song. Or students can write their own songs from scratch, start with a simple rhythm or melody, and then move to adding lyrics about memories that they have from their fifth grade year. So these are two fun examples of ways you can totally do a virtual performance with just your fifth graders instead of doing a typical fifth grade graduation or promotion or whatever your school calls it. If you do that, you can have them still like have a good memory to hang on to with fifth grade. Even if they're virtual, they can compose together as a class where mainly they are picking a song they've done during their elementary school year and they're adding to it. They're adding in layers like you may have already done with your students. If you've gone to any ORF training, you know what I'm talking about, but adding in ostinatos, they can add in another verse. They can maybe add in a vocal ostinato on top of what the lyrics are already singing. Someone can create a speech ostinato. Someone else can create movement to the song. Basically, they're just adding on to a song they've already done during the school year. Or like I said, option number 2 is writing songs from scratch. Start with simple rhythms and melodies. Say, give the students guidelines for how you want them to compose, but then say what their topic is some memory they have had from fifth grade. It doesn't have to just be in music class. Any memory they have from their fifth grade year, or you can tell them through their whole elementary experience from kindergarten through fifth grade or pre-K through fifth grade. What memory are you hanging on to? Pick one memory and you are going to write a simple song about that. So those are 2 ideas for you about yes, there's an end of the year classroom talent show, or you can also do an end of the year student performance as well. Another idea, and this is in the blog post I mentioned before about end of the year music activities, is freeze dance. This is so simple. You've probably done this all year, but what better idea to do at the end of the school year than freeze dance? Because your students are wanting to get up and move. They have a lot of energy right now and a lot of focus issues. Let's just be honest. And so playing freeze dance, just literally play music and let them freeze. One thing I love to do though, instead of just doing the typical game of freeze dance, is to add in, make it funny, like bring in humor to your classroom. So you could say like, everybody stand like a circle. And then you're going to see all these different variations of circle, tree, lion, whatever else. Call out random words for your students to freeze like. They will love it and just crack up because it's so funny to see what students come up with. Another great activity for the end of the school year is centers. Now, if you're new to centers and you're like, hold on, I don't know if I want to do all that. That's a lot. You can make it super simple. You can literally just maybe come up with 3 activities for your students to do. And guess what? If you're having a hard time keeping your students' interest this time of the year, centers is a great way because you go from teacher to facilitator. You're facilitating the activities and the lessons that are going on where your students are still 1000% learning, but they are kind of taking ownership of their learning while you're modifying. And of course, it's going to look different for lower and upper elementary, but there's so many different student center activities. And look for the link in the show notes as well, because I'm going to link to a blog post and a podcast episode about centers as well. And then one other idea I want to share is just tech ideas. just literally ask the classroom teacher before you see a certain grade or a certain class coming to your classroom. Say, hey, I really want you to bring their devices to class today, and just have a class period of tech. Have where you're not just showing a movie, which there's nothing wrong with that either, but literally have them explore different tech ideas that you've already used with them this school year. Give them guidelines about what to do, or give them student choice. And I'm not going to go into all the tech ideas here in this episode, but I just want to say you've probably already have several ideas and several websites or several different technology integration ideas you've already been using with your students. So what better way than at the end of the school year, letting them explore on these devices and go to websites or apps that they've already been using throughout the school year to create music, listen to music, learn about music, and all those other things you've been doing with your students. So if you are kind of like overwhelmed with thinking about lesson planning for the end of the school year, my main word I want you to keep in mind is to just keep it fun. Okay, this has been a stressful year. You are 100%, I almost said 1,000% again. I don't know why I'm stuck on that number today, but you're very aware that this has been a stressful year. You're living it every single day. So it's not like I'm saying give up on teaching and just like throw lesson planning out the window. But at the end of the school year, just make it more fun. Make your lesson plans a little bit more lighthearted. Yes, still cover the objectives and concepts, but make it where you're not feeling like, oh my gosh, like nobody's listening, but just bring in ways for your students to still learn music where you're, you know the phrase where you can't beat them, join them. You're not letting your students take over your classroom, but you're also letting go a little bit. You're like, okay, I'm just going to take a deep breath and just enjoy the end of the school year and know and accept the fact that this time of year is just the way it is. This is just how it is. Every single school year, I hear teachers say, oh my gosh, I'm so exhausted, and it snuck up on me, and why are the kids so crazy, and this. But it's like that every year. So it's like if you're just aware of it ahead of time and you know it's coming and you just understand that this is just what the end of the school year looks like, then it will really also help your mindset moving forward, getting those kiddos off into summer so you can get yourself into summer as well. Sound good? If you have any questions, reach out to me. I cannot wait to be back next week with another episode, and have an amazing rest of your week, friends, and I'll see you soon. Well, hey there. Thank you so much for listening into the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. There is an exclusive Facebook group just for listeners of this podcast and any elementary music teacher called the Elementary Music Teacher Community Facebook group. Come on over and join us there, where we have conversations around the podcast episodes and encourage each other each and every week. And also head to my website, thedomesticmusician.com. I have some free resources there that you can download to help you gain traction in your classroom today, as well as the blog and the membership site and all kinds of other goodies to help you keep going in your music teaching journey. I cannot wait to keep connecting with you and encouraging you and spurring you on in your journey of teaching elementary music. Hang in there, have an amazing week, and I will see you soon.